All right, everybody, we are back with some decks. Now, I know last week we didn't really do a whole lot of deck videos. I was focused on trying to get out as much competitive content as possible from Maverick Tournament League. We did do a tournament this past weekend, so that footage will be up in a little bit, probably later today, mostly tomorrow. Until then, we got Crimson Elusives. And yep, that's right, we're doing Crimson Elusives because I know you guys have been asking for a lot of the competitive deck reviews and just kind of how to play those decks. And that's what I really want to focus on, because this deck in particular, especially over this past weekend during the Duels of Runeterra tournament, number 11 for NA anyways, God, it did good. Oh my God, it was so freaking good. A lot of people were running it as their aggressive deck, using Noxus and Ionia, so it's definitely something I want to touch on. And as always, we're going to be getting into the deck itself first, going through the deck list in the deck editor, followed by 2 games. If you are new to the channel, welcome, 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 welcome. Do not forget to subscribe and hit that bell, click that bell. That way you get notified whenever I throw up a new video and when those Duels of Runeterra videos come out a little bit later this week. But if you're returning, welcome back. Good to have you, and I'm glad you're back because, like I said, we're getting into some more decks. So without further ado, let's go over this Crimson Elusive deck. Alright, so as you guys can see, this deck, I have aptly named it Cancer because I do believe it has taken over the spot from Bannerman. However, I do like this deck a lot more than I liked Bannerman. I kind of didn't like Bannerman because everybody was playing it, and it was just such a Cancer deck. This deck, there's, pretty much everybody's playing it because it's a damn good deck. It's Burn. Obviously, everybody wants to play Burn right off the bat, so this is definitely a deck after the patch notes, after the patch update, that you will be able to use to rank up and ladder for this new season. So definitely check it out, give it a try. But I do believe this is going to be taking over the spot from Bannerman for the Cancer, the #1 Cancer deck out there. So, all right, so let's get into this. So we got Crimson Elusives here. It is named Crimson basically just because of Crimson Disciple, even though there are 0 other Crimson cards in here. You could argue Imperial Demolitionist, I guess, and Transfusion is usually thrown in with the Crimson suite. But we also have the Ionia Elusive package. So what do I mean by that? I mean, a lot of the recall bounce units, so Solitary Monk, we do have Navori Conspirator, and then we also have a lot of the Elusives, Navori Blade Scout, we do have the Shadow Assassin in here as well. So lots of Elusives along that, elusive burn strategy that we've seen. Everybody's, played Ionia Freljord probably at some point. So, bounce the Omen Hawk back with Navori Conspirator, play it again. Very similar strategy, except instead of playing Omen Hawk, Jewel Protector, a lot of those, followers and champs that are going to buff your units up and your elusives up, you're playing Burn. And by Burn, we mean Crimson Disciple. And essentially, what you want to do is get Crimson Disciple with Imperial Demolitionist off, cannot talk, as many times as possible. Now, there are a couple different ways to play this deck. I do know that some people prefer to play Elixir of Iron, if I can find the card somewhere floating around in here. Elixir of Iron, very aggressive card, Elixir of Iron is. I mean, it's, if you have some elusives out on the board and you're going to get a direct attack in on your opponent, it's basically 1 mana, 3 damage, which is pretty damn efficient in my book. But it does kind of bog down your hand early game, and sometimes you don't really have a good target for it, especially if you're playing from behind. So I personally don't like it. A lot of people will actually go ahead and take out things like possibly one of the Navori Conspirators, a Retreat, maybe even a Solitary Monk, although usually you're always keeping 3 of those because this card is so damn good. And possibly a Blade Scout. I don't know. I mean, honestly, like I said, I don't play the Elixir of Wrath, so I'm usually doing 3 of most of this stuff, with the exception of Will and Decimate on the top end of the curve here. So the way that I like to play this deck is just really focus on this combo between Crimson Disciple and Imperial Demolitionist and bouncing it as much as humanly possible. So God, does it feel good to get like a Solitary Monk off after you've played Crimson Disciple, Imperial, then Solitary Monk, do it all over again. That's a sweet 16 damage. So you're actually going to see that, I think, in one of these games, how that works. Another thing that you're going to see is Will of Ionia here, right? And Noxian Fervor. So one of the biggest things with Noxian Fervor is that if your opponent decides to block one of your units and gives it lifesteal, you can actually Noxian Fervor your own unit, deal 3 damage, and prevent the lifesteal. So Noxian Fervor is usually credited with dealing more than 3 damage just because of that reason. It prevents the lifesteal. Will of Ionia, same thing. You're usually going to want to target a Vi with something like Spirit's Refuge on it, which I do believe you'll see in one of these games. It ends up being, a 4 mana prevent your opponent from healing 10 damage on like a 10 attack Vi with a Spirit's Refuge, right? And that's a pretty big deal. So Will of Ionia, great card. Definitely a consideration to put 3 of it in here. And Noxian Fervor, you'll see how we kind of use it in these next couple of games here that we're going to go over. So with that said, I will shut up now. We're going to get into both of these games with the Crimson Elusive deck. All right, and here we have the first matchup. It's actually against Heimer Vi, and this is exactly what I was talking about. This is going to be a very common matchup in today's meta. Heimer Vi pretty much untouched in the nerf, or in the patch updates, I should say, for 1.4. So you do see we do start out with the Navori Blade Scout here, and it does get thermal beamed. That's actually not that bad. I mean, our opponent is preventing the 2 damage really early on here, which is unfortunate, but I'd rather have my Navori Blade Scout thermal beamed than my Crimson Disciple. And again, as I discussed, going through the deck, the Crimson Disciple is probably the most important card in the deck. You want to protect it. The way that our hand is looking right now, we do have the 2 Imperial Demolitionists. That's kind of the dream, all right? I mean, when you got multiple Crimson Disciples or multiple Imperial Demolitionists, that's exactly what you want to see in your first couple of turns with this deck. You want to be able to get these off. You do see us play one here because we do know that we have the Retreat as a backup. Now, I do opt to play a second Imperial Demolitionist, and that is mainly because my opponent had 3 mana and did not prevent the first one. 9 times out of 10, they would have got excited. They would have done something, Mystic Shot, to go ahead and kill the Crimson Disciple on that first Imperial Demolitionist. So I felt pretty safe being able to get that second one off. Now, going into my next turn, I don't want to play the Crimson Disciple here with the 2 mana because I don't really have a way to protect it. If my opponent does decide to get excited or use, some sort of Thermo Beam or removal, I don't have the additional mana for the Retreat. And that's one of the reasons I love Retreat in this deck. I mean, it essentially saves all of your important units. Not to mention Solitary Monk and Navori Conspirator being able to bounce everything back to your hand as well to be more, proactive. It's just, you can see here with the Retreat on this Thermo Beam, that's just debilitating. I mean, my opponent basically went all in on making sure that, they could remove my Crimson Disciple with that Thermo Beam, and the Retreat just completely denies them. So, very, very good card. Will of Ionia, you can see I'm actually thinking about just doing it on the Vi here. I do think I end up doing it anyways, and that is mainly to maintain tempo. I do consider, briefly, the Noxian Fervor. I end up going with the Will of Ionia because at this point in the game, my opponent is really is falling behind on tempo, right? And I know that I have additional Crimson Disciples and Imperial Demolitionists in my hand to kind of go off, multiple times in the next couple of turns. Due to that, I know my opponent needs to hold on to mana to be able to prevent these from going off, which is exactly why you can see they didn't play the Vi there. They held 4 mana to play the Will of Ionia. And I know that I have responses to that. I know that I have plenty of options. I can get it back to my hand. I have the Retreat. Will of Ionia, honestly, I don't even care about because it's going back to my hand anyways. So sure, you prevented 1 Imperial Demolitionist. Congratulations. I'm just going to get more anyways. So, and you're going to see as I draw into another, I believe, Solitary Monk, that that's exactly why this course of action, I guess I should say, turned out the way that it did. When you're up on your opponent, that's one of the things that this deck can do that other burn decks cannot. You can actually maintain tempo and card advantage pretty well with this deck. We're about to go into, let's say, turn 8 here coming up, and you can see we basically are card for card with our opponent right now. I think our opponent's actually 1 up on us, and that's, partly because they played a Will of Ionia. But a burn deck, usually your plan with a burn deck is, all right, let's exhaust our whole hand, try to do as much damage as possible, as quickly as possible. And even though we don't have any cards left, it doesn't matter because our opponent lost. Well, this deck is doing damage while also maintaining cards on the field. And not only that, cards that are continuously scary on the field. Keeping a Crimson Disciple on the field is terrible. I mean, you're just going to be able to keep triggering it over and over and over again. You know, because of the tempo that we currently have up on our opponent, you see another Will of Ionia there come out on Crimson Disciple. And that's just like, that's so incredibly bad for them. I mean, yeah, sure, it saves the 4 damage, so I do understand why they have to play it. I mean, they're obviously forced into doing that with their hand, but it's only going to come down again. And then they're only going to have to deal with more Imperial Demolitionist and Crimson Disciple with how much bounce that this deck plays. You know, I drew into another Solitary Monk. I'm going to get this Crimson Disciple off at some point, which means I'm going to be able to, which means I'm playing the Imperial Demolitionist, meaning I'm going to bounce all of them back to my hand. I do decide to open attack here with the Solitary Monk because I want to draw out some sort of removal if possible. Same thing with the Noxian Fervor. Typically, Noxian Fervor, you want to like wait till the end of the game to use it as like, you know, a last 3 damage wins the game. Or, like I was discussing earlier, you want to use it to prevent your opponent blocking with Lifesteal or something similar. In that case, I actually wanted to draw out some additional removal. I wanted to draw out the Deny, but my opponent was actually smart and played the Deny, or held the Deny and played it after the fact to prevent the next Imperial Demolitionist. So good on my opponent for doing that and not falling for my bait with the Noxian Fervor to try to pull out some more removal. But it doesn't really matter because of this Solitary Monk. I mean, the Solitary Monk just comes down, returns everything, and I just get to do this all over again. And my opponent is going to be very disappointed because my opponent likely attacked with the Spirit's Refuge, thinking that, okay, now that the Noxian Fervor is gone, I can, you know, guarantee I'm going to get 10 heal. Well, he didn't expect that I would have another Will of Ionia, and that is exactly why Will of Ionia is so redonkulous, just not even just in general, but especially in this deck. It's so hard, too, because, like, I feel like it's such a balanced card, but not. I don't know. It's just so good. It's never going to be a bad card. It's just absolutely never going to be a bad card. So next up, we have a similar deck, right? This deck, our opponent is trying to also play in an aggro fashion. I don't really know what this is. I haven't played it yet. I'm still playing a lot of new decks due to the new patch updates coming out and having to, you know, cast the tournament over this past weekend. So this one I'm very unfamiliar with, but it is playing Darius and it is playing Overwhelm. So with the buff to Basilisk Rider, I am expecting to see a lot more Overwhelm decks, but knowing that, I need to play a little bit differently. My last game was going to be, it's completely different from this game. The last game was Control. My opponent's playing a lot slower. This game, my opponent's trying to play like probably faster than me, right? So I need to be careful of my life here. I can't go too low, too fast. He's already got this early Basilisk Rider with the Omen Hawk as well to do a ton of damage. Now, what I need to do in this matchup is play to my strengths. And my strength currently, which is why I'm thinking about the Transfusion right now, is Elusive. I was thinking about using the Transfusion to push an additional 2 damage just to be that much faster than my opponent. I actually get rewarded for saving it towards the end here. You'll see in a second. But it's really scary right now, right? My opponent is threatening a ton of damage. I actually block incorrectly here. I should have played around the Transfusion. I kind of get punished because my Solitary Monk ends up dying to this Crimson Disciple. My opponent decides to go ahead and Transfusion. He does push an additional 2 damage, pretty much, regardless of what target he chooses. Thank God for Will of Ionia. Again, you can see Will of Ionia there being great in a defense, situation as well. But this is where I get rewarded for saving the Transfusion, using it on the Crimson Disciple, attacking with the Elusive unit. I do have the Noxian Fervor. My opponent decides to spend his last 2 mana. Bad move. Now I know I can definitely win the game off this. God, Noxian Fervor is so damn good. All right, guys, that's it. I hope you guys learned something about that deck. It's extremely fast. It's, in my eyes, a lot faster than the burn decks of old. It's even faster than the Elusive burn decks of old. The combo potential with the returns, the retreat returns, I should say, and just the Solitary Monks being able to return, everything that you just played for like 8 damage back to your hand, recycle, do it all over again next turn. Absolutely bonkers how much damage you can do with this deck over the course of like 2 or 3 turns. You could probably do 20 damage in the course of 3 turns, possibly even 2 turns. Probably not 20, probably do 16 damage in 2 turns. Relatively easy. So definitely a deck you should consider if you're in like iron, bronze, silver, gold, even platinum. You could probably get up to diamond using this deck if you're able to pilot it successfully and pilot it well. You should be golden, honestly. This deck is quick, it is strong, and it is scary. So until next time, as always, everybody stay healthy, stay positive. I hope shit just works for you, and peace out.